I now yield to Chairman Biggs for the purpose of making an opening statement.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm pleased to be here today. I thank you, Mr. Chairman, and your staff for hosting this important hearing today. The business before us today is a hearing entitled ATF's Assault on the Second Amendment. When is enough enough, close quote. And that really is the question of this. When is enough enough? That is a question that we have to resolve because there is a concerted effort to change the regulations that ATF has put in place and that millions of people have relied upon. ATF is engaged in various practices that seek to undermine the Second Amendment rights of Americans across the United States. The Biden administration has weaponized the ATF as it has weaponized every institution of our federal government. And this weaponization is an attack on law-abiding Americans. It is time for Congress to uphold the appropriate checks and balances by examining these actions by its own government against the American people. Hopefully today's hearing is just the beginning of holding ATF and countless other agencies under this administration accountable for its lawless overregulation of law-abiding Americans. And the good news is this is just the beginning of oversight, as we've been informed today that ATF will come to a hearing in April. We're having this hearing in part because the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives has abused its rulemaking authority delegated to it by Congress, this body. Earlier this year, ATF issued a final rule titled Factoring Criteria for Firearms with Attached Stabilizing Braces. That rule effectively bans pistol stabilizing braces nationwide. We will hear today from the inventor of those braces. Disabled persons, including the disabled veterans for whom the pistol brace originally was created, will lose the benefit of this useful tool and potentially their ability to operate firearms entirely. The final rule provides that pistols equipped with stabilizing braces meet the definition of a firearm under the National Firearms Act, and that any weapons with stabilizing braces or similar attachments that constitute rifles under the NFA must be registered. Under this rule, millions of law-abiding gun owners will be forced to remove their stabilizing braces from their pistols, install longer gun barrels, register their weapons as short-barreled rifles, or destroy their braced weapons or face felony charges. You heard that correctly. Millions of law-abiding Americans will be turned into felons overnight by the stroke of a pen and without any congressional action. In other words, by unelected bureaucrats who believe they can make law, apply law, enforce and adjudicate law. That is something every American should be concerned about, because that is the definition that James Madison wrote so eloquently in the 62nd Federalist, is the definition of tyranny. And it doesn't just apply to this agency. Those of you who applauded in this agency, will you applaud it in every other agency when an administration changes and you've been relying on a rule and it changes without your elected representative weighing in on it? This is not an international, but a nationwide threat. This is not what our nation's founders intended. This rule terrifies my own constituents. They ask me how Congress passed this law. They're shocked when I describe the administrative rulemaking process. They did not vote for this. They didn't elect the individuals making these decisions. And in fact, I didn't vote for this. That is a huge problem. The pistol brace rule exceeds the ATF's statutory authority. Congress has neither criminalized the use of pistol braces under the Gun Control Act, nor authorized their regulation under the National Firearms Act. To make matters worse, for more than a decade, ATF actually told the manufacturers and consumers of pistol braces that the devices were perfectly legal before this abrupt about-face. That can happen with every agency. I hope you're not applauding this abuse of bureaucratic authority today because you happen to be sympathetic with what this rule is. Because I can tell you, every agency can then turn on the American citizen. When ATF isn't exceeding their statutory authority criminalizing products they once deemed legal, they're making it more difficult for law-abiding Americans to purchase firearms by capriciously revoking the licenses of American gun dealers. The Biden administration, acting on behalf of the gun control lobby, has targeted firearm businesses. Another example, soon after taking office, President Biden demanded the Justice Department adopt a zero-tolerance policy to revoke federal firearms licenses from those who committed willful violations of the law. That wasn't what the law is. There was no statutory authority for that. But shortly thereafter, ATF updated its federal firearms licensee quick reference and best practices guide to state ATF will, absent extraordinary circumstances, initiate proceedings to revoke the license of any dealer that has committed a willful regulatory violation of the Gun Control Act for specified violations. ATF has begun to revoke the licenses of FFLs for simple, technical, and non-material paperwork violations, violations that are anything but willful. They are revoking licenses for minor paperwork violations that have no bearing whatsoever on public safety. ATF's overzealous enforcement of paperwork infractions is shutting down small businesses and diverting resources away from holding criminals accountable. FFLs and law-abiding citizens are not the cause of firearm-related deaths. The Biden administration knows this. If it were concerned with safety, they would not be the most soft-on-crime administration in my lifetime. Guns are not the problem. Law-abiding gun owners are not the problem. Violent criminals whose sentences are cut short due to lax prosecution, who roam the streets instead of being incarcerated, are the problem. The ATF should be directing its agents to go after these criminals, not directing their agents to check for technical paperwork errors from FFLs and chase down disabled persons with pistol braces. When is enough enough? Well, I think we have seen enough, and I hope that we can act to put an end to this ATF overreach. And I would suggest that the most effective approach is to reduce funding, or better still, eliminate all funding, and even better, eliminate this woke, weaponized agency. I yield back.